today's theme is really around what's going on in Australia. Where is Australia at? What's going on? Some restrictions are being lifted. Some things are about to evolve, maybe for the better, which is great news. And what does the next phase of developing graduates maybe look like? For those of you who are new to our family, DBL, we've helped more of the future workforce than anyone we know develop human and soft skills. And we work with employers, largely universities in some cases, around those soft and human skills. Early talent need to hit the ground running and increase their speed to value. We make a huge investment in making sure that our work supports behavioural change and is backed by science. And we also invest really, really heavily in our expertise in helping people make transition, because we know it's tough right now if you're a young person having just joined a large organisation or thinking about or maybe have secured or in the process of securing a role to join next year as well. And we're pretty obsessed with this idea right now. And if you've been to some of our recent events, you would have seen this particular statement also, that human beings are hardwired to dislike uncertainty. We like a bit of variety. We like a bit of spontaneity every now and again. We like a bit of change. Change is as good as a holiday, as they say, but we're hard at a more neural level. We are hardwired to dislike ongoing uncertainty. And obviously that's what we've all been feeling and our early talent have been feeling of late. And this discussion, as I said, is about, well, what's the next phase of that look like, and what are some of the things that we can be thinking about in our graduate development program. And before I show you the three things that we're going to cover today, I do want to show you what we heard from the employers in the room. This is what you told us is going on for you right now. The first one, how clearly can you see what your graduate training and development program will look like after COVID-19? About 36% of you are clear. No one's very clear, like super clear. No one's very clear, but 36% are clear on what it will look like after COVID-19. The majority are neither clear nor unclear, so maybe unsure about it. Nearly 41%, that's the largest group. And then 22, nearly 23% are actually would consider yourselves unclear, as in don't know. Well, what is it going to look like? Question 2, beyond COVID-19, our organisation expects graduate training and development to return to the way it was. Of 50% disagreeing with that statement, so saying that it will not return to the way it was. And then a cheeky 4.5%, which is not insignificant, saying you strongly disagree. So nearly 55% either disagreeing or strongly disagreeing that graduate training and development will return to the way it was. But a really solid, again, 36% agreeing with that statement. Question 3, COVID-19 will help create long-term change and innovation in how graduate training and development is designed and delivered. So there's an overwhelming 72% there that agree or strongly agree. No one disagrees with that statement on the employer front or strongly disagrees. It's either not sure or agree or strongly agree. And you know, naturally, I mean, we're always up for innovation and change and pioneering new ideas and thinking about different ways of doing things. We're quite excited about what the next phase looks like. And this next question here, what do you believe the likelihood is of virtual delivery becoming the main delivery mode for graduate training and development? So again, there's a bit of a split in the industry when it comes to employers around what the future sort of shape and design and delivery will look like when it comes to graduate training and development. Again, there's a slight leniency towards change in responses to that question, but maybe not as virtual in all quarters as some of the other questions might suggest. What is the current state of play regarding your graduate training and development program? Overwhelming 77% have moved ahead with the same or similar program and converted it to virtual delivery in the short term, which again for us is no surprise. I think we've only maybe had one or two, I think maybe only one organization that we work with globally that hasn't converted. And in fact, I'm quite happy to say we've had other organizations join us in the last 30 to 60 to 90 days to help them go virtual as well. So there's been a massive move, enormous move in the industry to virtual delivery. It's had this overnight, it's been a bit of an overnight sensation in terms of credibility and adaptability as a way that can really achieve some great results. So thanks both for joining us. We will go to Eleanor first. And Eleanor, I guess there's three questions that I've got. As the first one is, which stage do you think Coles is at now, and kind of which stage do you think you're moving to?
Yeah, thanks there, Josh. So yeah, look, it's been really interesting. I am new to Coles, so it's been really interesting kind of being coming in here and picking it up and running with it. So we're probably just ticking into the reimagine stage. And I think, you know, it really has, Coles has historically been an in-person training environment, very much so. And so COVID has really taught us that that's not essential. It doesn't have to be in person. So it's really allowed us to experience working virtually because we've had to. And actually, we probably would have received some pushback from that if it hadn't been essentially mandated. So it's been really great to actually just get in there and start to do that.
Fantastic. And so what, like the second question is, what are some of the considerations that you found have needed to be made in the last couple of months? And what are some of the considerations or decisions that are on the table at the moment, thinking forward?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, Coles was part of the news almost every day when this was really hitting us hard. And for our grads that started in February, their first few months here have looked completely different to how they would have anticipated or how anybody anticipated. So they actually ended up working out in store for a lot longer than was originally planned for. And unfortunately, we really needed to think about what was putting the business first in this time of crisis. And that did mean that those development days that would have happened throughout March did need to be pushed back and of course then run virtually. So, and then returning back to scale has kind of happened, but we're now moving into that redesign. But now, because we can do it virtually, we can record it, and that's kind of something that we can do much more flexibly than we have been able to in the past.
A bulk of your graduates are in Melbourne at head office.
That's right.
You still have grads around the country as well, or are they 99% in Melbourne?
We do. So we have two different graduate programs. One is for Store Support Centre, which is our head office. And then the other one is for operations graduates. So they're working in our supermarkets, in our distribution centres, in Coles Express operations. So very, very different experience for them too. They would have just been thrown right into the deep end there, dealing with the crisis management and supporting the store managers in that. So they've had a completely different experience to what it would have been like, picking up your laptop and working from home, a week or a couple of weeks after you'd started. So, lots of different sorts of touch points with them and really understanding what has the experience been, because while we all have different experiences, there are some vastly different experiences amongst our grads, particularly for this newly started cohort.
Yeah. And I can imagine one of the considerations you need to make is travel. How easy does that become? How soon? How willing are people to travel? Do we keep it virtual? Are there some periods are there some sort of touch points that we bring people together?
Yeah, absolutely. For us, it means that we're able to, if we're thinking about the next 3 to 6 months, and the rise of virtual learning for Coles means that we are able to get together a good combination of both. Ideally, that's the end goal for us, is this will allow us to be flexible, but to critically assess what we're delivering in our program, and is this particular element crucial to be done in person, because we don't want to miss out on that potential lost connectedness, which can happen by virtual learning or virtual, engagement, or is it something that's an information session on how performance at Coles works that we can run as an opt-in session, record it and make it available. We don't have to get everybody. That's not crucial to get everybody into a room to do that. It's a steep learning curve for Coles, and certainly really exciting. And I think with the travel, that is going to mean that it's different for individuals who do want to come back into the office, people who are traveling around the different states that we've got. At the moment, what's being talked about around Coles is that if we get back to it looking like at head office 100% of what it did before COVID, which, as I mentioned, is, you know, your pretty standard, almost full working environment or workspace. We've failed. One of the leaders in our organisational effectiveness team the other day said that she believes that we're about 3 years ahead of where we were 2 months ago in terms of flexible working and remote learning. So that's really exciting.
Yeah, that is. Wow, 3 years.
Yeah.
I haven't heard a leader claim a future-oriented time.
It has been interesting though, Josh. I think because it's certainly been interesting for me coming from starting at Coles within COVID. So coming from professional services where virtual learning, online learning is certainly more part and parcel than it has been at Coles. That kind of time frame to be thinking that, you know, it would have taken us about 3 years to get to where we are now in terms of flexible and remote learning and working. That does ring true to me from what I can see is what it was like before COVID. So that's really exciting for us to be able to take advantage of that.
Yeah, fantastic. Third main question, any initial thoughts on what the future of training and development, you know, for graduates might look like as an industry or as an approach?
Yeah, I think it really will be that good combination of both virtual and in-person learning and making that critical assessment as to where the value actually is and what you're delivering. I think that will then lead to a lot of kind of on-demand learning from our grads, being able to access recordings and webinars and all that type of stuff more than they have been previously. But I don't think we're ever going to be able to give away completely some of that in-person training where we're allowed to, obviously. I think that, you know, certainly our new grads are missing that connectedness that you hope to get as a fully formed kind of grad cohort. So I think it'll be a combination of both.
We might cross to Sarah McGlade at National Australia Bank. Like I said, Sarah's super experienced in the talent management space, but also has been quite hands-on and involved in the strategy for NAB's intern and graduate attraction, selection, development program for a number of years now. Which stage would you say NAB is at the moment?
I would say we're probably in that reimagine, redesign phase. I think NAB is in a very good position because our graduate development program has always been based on using various training modalities. So we've already had in our development program the use of virtual workshops, online learning, virtual reality, face-to-face, self-directed learning. So for us to convert some of our programs already into virtual wasn't a huge challenge for us. Yeah. And to be quite honest, with our development program, we do front load and back load with the face-to-face development. And then we have quarterly drops throughout that journey. Luckily for us, within that, you know, first quarter when COVID hit, that's when we actually do our virtual workshops. Our graduates, you know, have just started with their teams. You know, we dropped some really pertinent topics for them. It's all virtually delivered. So we didn't really have to do too much in that phase. But as we're now starting to move further in the journey, as a team, yes, they're looking at what are the programs that we had planned, which were face-to-face, and can they be converted to virtual learning? Some can, and we'll be seeing in June, our graduates will be attending a business acumen workshop, normally 2 days face-to-face. That's been converted now into 3 half-day virtual sessions. But then there's another program that they would have attended, which was human-centered design. And that really can't be converted into virtual. That works successfully because it's all about dealing with individuals, looking at their body language, you know, having focus groups and questions, etc. So we're really looking at, you know, the next part of our development program, what can be converted and what should we start to think about and reimagine going forward. Yeah, absolutely. And I guess one of the other key factors for us to consider is we would always use face-to-face delivery as an opportunity to also engage our cohort with each other and engage them with leaders. So how do we think about that and do that differently when it's not face-to-face, but still have the same engagement, cohort engagement, still have the same access to our leaders, and still have the same access to information as well. And so that's also, you know, a consideration for us as we progress. But probably one of the other pieces for us is actually reimagining and rethinking what our new normal is going forward. And certainly a little bit like with Coles, the banking industry, you know, has changed considerably with COVID-19. You know, within a space of 2 weeks, we received, you know, 200,000 phone calls from customers. We've had 80,000 loan repayment deferrals. We've had increase in chatbots, and we're seeing that people don't want to use cash anymore. So certainly as we progress through COVID, we're actually now starting to think about, well, what are the new capabilities that we need to build in our early career talent? And so, you know, where we would focus on self-awareness, which was, you know, around personal brand and reputation, there's a thought maybe we now need to tilt that into self-management, which is about resilience and well-being and, you know, managing your time. Focus more on with the customer, when we would look at the customer, maybe post-COVID, we need to focus on relationship building and actually building networks and greater connections with customers. There's certainly a lot of talk around building more digital skills and analytics skills. So we're seeing that COVID is actually forcing us to rethink what banking looks like and what is the talent that we need and what are the capabilities that we need to build in that talent to then take us through to that next phase. I think there might also be some great value in probably a little like what Eleanor mentioned as well, is some on-demand development and potentially a greater opportunity for our talent to self-direct their learning. You know, maybe not a one-size-fits-all approach anymore. Maybe we can have, you know, various opportunities to cover different capabilities, and graduates can tap into it as and when they need and where it makes sense in their development program for them as well.
All right, thanks so much. Angela, I can see the chat room climbing there in number of comments. Questions, thoughts, feelings for the group or for Eleanor and Sarah?
Yeah, there's a great question on the chat from Grace to everyone actually, and I know that Hannah's already responded on the chat room, but I want to share that here over back to you, Josh, as well. Is Grace keen to understand how other businesses and industries are finding their entry-level talent engagement now compared to pre-COVID? Are your entry-level talent enjoying the virtual training and development, or are they anting to wait until restrictions are lifted to engage face-to-face?
Yeah, I think it depends at what stage of the program they're actually at. So we have a 2-year program, which means we've got some grads that have been here for almost 2 years and are now looking at that role of process you mentioned earlier, Josh. And then some that obviously only joined in February, much like a lot of programs. So it does depend. Some are enjoying it, some are not really finding it that beneficial. I think that the new grads are finding it helpful to have just a touch point and that engagement with each other as well as the grad team. But I think that they probably are missing that face-to-face as well, and hoping that it's going to get back to that too, as you know, as a lot of people are, I guess.
I'd say it's probably the same with our graduates as well. So with our 2020 graduates, we haven't really had to change their program up until this day, because as I mentioned before, you know, most of that first period is very much virtual delivered. We will now see, you know, the next phase, what that will look like. For our 2019 graduates, they've kind of already completed the bulk of their training and development, and they are in that roll-off period. So, you know, they're quite comfortable and, you know, they're entrenched in their teams and, you know, they're part of their teams and delivering that way. I think for us, again, it's just about how do we maintain engagement throughout this process, because our face-to-face delivery was really about that engagement, about building networks, about getting exposure to leaders, about checking in on each other, and how do we do that in a different environment? That's the question for us.
Yeah, I would say at a more sort of macro kind of industry level in Australia, but also in Asia, the UK, Europe, there's a difference in how graduates are responding between those who have had the chance to physically connect and have established relationships, and those who have not. Those who have had that chance have had that kind of that psychological need for connectedness fulfilled, a base level in the cup, so to speak, have responded really well. And there are, where if there are concerns, it's normally where the graduates just haven't had a chance to come together yet. And so not only have they started in a new organisation, a new grad scheme, first rotation, etc., but they've literally never met anybody either. So there's just a different response there. But I have to say, I asked this same question in a series of interviews that we're doing at the moment, called, as I mentioned before, called The Future is Human. We've just done the second episode. Nick White was the first episode. He's the head of early talent for Europe for Fujitsu, raving about how his 400 apprentices and grads have responded, just in terms of how agile they've been and how flexible and how quickly they've moved into working from home. And also Gemma Hudson at Salesforce said something similar, just about how well they have adapted to, one, working from home, but two, just different modes of learning also. But again, I think it comes back to what base did they launch into this from, which is a consideration to make as you reimagine and redesign your way forward and you navigate your program forward as well. Is where were they? Not just where are they, but where were they as well when they entered into this? Okay, so let's look at some graduate and early talent strategies. And this is based on the sort of point of view that this year early talent needs some different and in some respects earlier support to maintain, one, their well-being, most important, two, their speed to value in what is quite a different environment. Our point of view is that we need to be thinking about pre-boarding. You need to be thinking about pre-boarding your 2021 graduates. And from a psychology and behavioural science point of view, the reason is this: that we already know from lots of research that transition is difficult, and the transition from university to work is one of the most significant a human will make in their life. And moving from one environment to another, two completely fundamentally different environments, and that transition can be hard in a good year, in a normal year. Psychologically, if you are 21 right now and applying for roles on grad schemes and thinking about starting in January, February, March next year, you're unsure about what this is going to look like. So you've got the transition that's already difficult and uncertain, with the added ambiguity and challenges of this moment. And we've got to remember, if you're 21 right now, like, this is your 9/11. This is your 08-09 financial crisis. This is your, like, oh my goodness, the world can be a really, wow, really interesting place. And if that's hitting while you're making what is already a difficult transition, which it is for these people, then we've got to think psychologically for these young people and provide them with some certainty and some guidance through the ambiguity between now and when they start. Pre-boarding is not new. It's not new at all, but it has been used in recent years. National Australia Bank, for an example, with Sarah, we've been doing that sort of work there for 2 or 3 years now. It has been a strategy to, one, reduce renege rates, but also, secondly, to have your graduates turn up in February more work ready than ever before, because not only have you kept them connected to their cohorts, they've built relationships, they've started to develop some of those soft work ready skills, those human skills, and they're turning up ready to hit the ground running and a better chance of increasing their speed to value. This year, psychologically, what it will do for them is provide them some confidence, provide them some connectedness, provide them some certainty that, one, they've made the right choice, and two, you've got their back. And psychologically for them, that's going to be super important this year as you bring in those 2021 grads. So number one, benefits of pre-boarding this year: can reduce cognitive load upon starting, and takes a little pressure, potentially logistically and time-wise, off your onboarding program as well. If you can use this next 6 months to get some stuff done, then it can take a bit of pressure off your onboarding agenda as well. Secondly, it can increase speed to value by building their competence and connectedness with peers and the business. And then three, can provide that additional layer of support as well. So if you haven't pre-boarded in the past, of all years, seriously consider pre-boarding as part of your reimagined strategy for this year's graduates. An example of some of the skills or masterclasses that you could run virtually are these types of things. These are some of the topics that we see getting kind of talked about and delivered in this sort of space: adaptability, mindset, resilience, which Sarah talked about, self-management, which was also talked about this morning already, teamwork, collaboration, brand, taking charge of your career during change, which is what they'll need to do more than ever. These types of topics are going to be important. And if you think there is any chance at all of these graduates starting in a remote environment from home, depending on timing and business strategy and how your organization approaches the new normal, some of these areas can be, some of these skills can be tweaked for remote settings as well. You know, remote teamwork is quite different. You know, you can be giving them skills around that. Building a personal brand from home through a computer screen, a little bit different. How do you handle yourself on virtual meetings? All of that type of thing. Like I said, if you haven't pre-boarded in the past, this is the year to start. Your grads need it from you psychologically, if there's no other reason, but there's strong business and commercial benefits for doing it as well. The second idea here is thinking forward to summer internships and how you might virtualize them. Now, I'm not necessarily talking about running virtual internships, but thinking about how you might virtualize some of your internship experience might be a smart thing to do as well. Remember, we talked about in the reimagine phase about your new approach needing to be flexible and have alternatives as well. It is I know for our business, it's all our clients in the UK and Europe, it's all they're talking about. It's our designers are working on them, our sales teams are working on them. It is the thing that almost every employer is talking about, and taking a whole array of different approaches, to. For us, there's kind of there's lots of approaches, but there's two approaches we've been working on. One is providing training in virtual settings to be part of a remote internship program. On some of the work readiness skills that really count, combination of different platforms being used, but as part of an overall remote internship agenda. But then the second one is a more immersive experience, a more deep dive on what it's actually like to work in your organization. And we've been actually doing this for about a year and a half to a couple of years now, as well, with our friends at Inside Sherpa, and providing the learning design and the soft skill, human skill content for virtual internships on the Inside Sherpa platform. So that's been really, really exciting as well. So it doesn't have to be, you don't have to virtualize everything, but there can be different elements you might choose to do virtually or remotely, or you might decide to remote the whole thing. And some of the work ready skills for internships have been these, and I show you these coming from the UK and Europe and Asia are in this period right now. They're going into summer. Internships are launching now or in the next sort of two to 4 weeks. So things around having a learner-centered mindset, the basics of effective communication, time management, agility, personal professionalism, but making sure, and none of these really are too new. And for those who are in remote settings as well, again, how do you do these things remotely? How do you do these things through a computer screen from home? But the whole internship space is being turned on its head in other parts of the world right now, because they're delivering them under lockdown. Some are being shortened. The idea of access and insight being the most important thing is a big theme, but also condensing internships is a really big trend. So maybe not going for the full 10-week thing, like getting it down to 21 days, 3 or 4 weeks. Lots of different approaches being taken that will be worth listening to and considering as Australia moves into internships as well. Again, not saying they all need to be virtualized, but flexible approaches, blended approaches, minimize risk and innovate super smart mindset to have over the next.
And just talking about some ideas around how to engage the talent and how to think about that. And there were some excellent thoughts from Tim about thinking about informal engagement strategies. So looking at Zoom music trivia, quizzes, bringing graduates versus managers into that kind of environment, maybe including questions on the organisation, have a bit of a knowledge quiz coming through on that, which I believe then also Andre shared his perspective that he's done something quite similar and it's worked really, really well. And I think one thing that's come really interesting from this chat is not forgetting about the connectiveness and the benefits of bringing graduates with managers together. I think that's a really important point, and absolutely something that we're hearing a lot globally is this challenge of not only graduates wanting to connect even more with their managers, but how do we support managers themselves to be able to do that in the environments that we're in right now. So great input from everybody.
And then this next part is about your existing cohorts, your grads who started in January, February, March this year, or maybe into year 2, or sort of a year and a half in. We asked the employers in the room this afternoon, in the last 36 hours, what do you believe are some of the biggest challenges your graduates will have in the next 30 to 90 days? We asked hundreds of graduates this very same session within the last probably about 3 weeks as well, as a result of the free live sessions that we've been doing around the world for graduates and interns. In their feedback, they were asked exactly the same question with exactly the same choices. And we thought, wouldn't it be interesting just to compare them as an interesting data point? Now, some of the employers, in fact, a number of the employers on this call have had graduates in those live sessions. So there is going to be, this data is actually going to line up between, for those employers, what your grads think and what you actually think at the moment. I will also add some further assurance that the graduate data, while taken from a global initiative, we stripped out the rest of the world, and we've actually just used Australian interns and grads. We've got Australian interns and grads think, and Australian employers think. Australian interns and grads in the next 30 days, this data was taken probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago. Networking, building relationships was the biggest. Developing and growing myself was the second biggest. Followed by understanding my role and my value. Third point is a consistent theme in the live sessions over the last number of weeks as well. So here's what employers thought. Resilience and wellbeing, 13, bang on. Well done, team. On the same page there. Developing and growing yourself, 18% of grads thought that was one of the biggest challenges. Only 10% of employers. So maybe a little bit of an understatement there. Working with people in teams, 8 versus 13. So grads and interns are a bit more confident than maybe employers might think, but only a little bit, 9% compared to 13%, not too much of a difference, but definitely a difference. Adapting to changing conditions, 6, they're pretty confident on that front. Employers have less faith at 12%, which is interesting. Understanding your role and value, 14%. Nearly 15% of grads thought that was one of the biggest challenges. It was only 7% of grads, half, would think that is one of the biggest challenges. So a big difference there. Networking and building relationships, 20% and 27%, so kind of on the same page, but yeah, definitely a gap. Getting the feedback and support you need, 14 and 15, so on the same page there as well. So definitely some similarities. Resilience and well-being. I mean, of all data, that is the most promising to see employers and grads on the same page about, because you're talking about well-being and mental health. And if you look at that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5th one down under what grads think, understanding your role and value, it's a concern for them. When we cross to chat rooms in those live sessions with grads in Australia and around the world, some of the questions were things like, how do I stay relevant in this new world? I'd only just entered in my role, and one of my concerns now is, come Christmas, I'm not sure I'm going to have the skills I need to be relevant, and I'm not sure what my role will be, what will entail, whether I'll have the right skills, what my value will be. So I think that's a really important thing to take note of. It was quite a strong theme in the comments and questions through the sessions, and it's showing up in the data there. but it's also showing up in the data there that employers don't think it's as big a challenge. So I would take note of that. And if you haven't had that conversation with your grads, or you're not building that into your reimagining and redesigning of your program, it's a conversation worth having. The other piece here, I think, is around adapting to changing conditions, and this piece around remote working. Potential here for your grads to be overconfident on working remotely and adapting to change, potentially from a lack of life experience, real world work experience, whereas those of us in this room with more seasoned careers and a bit more perspective can see this maybe being a challenge. There's potentially some blind spots in graduate cohorts around those two points. But again, if you haven't had that conversation with your grads, have it. If you're not building that into your reimagined, redesigned programs, consider doing it. Sarah, Eleanor, how does this line up for you guys at NAB and Coles?
I guess it doesn't surprise me with the networking and building relationships, especially if we're thinking about not only just the grads that have just started, but even if you're a grad that's been there for, 1, 2, 3 rotations, at the moment they're all still new in this current rotation. So that's really going to impact probably all of our cohort, is that networking. And it's the same for anyone who's new at a business or in a team at the moment. There's no one stopping by your desk to have a chat or build that natural rapport with. So finding out who's who in the zoo and who, where you can get information from is certainly harder.
Yeah, great.
And from our perspective, it's probably around that, understanding role and value. So certainly for our 2020 graduates who had only been with us for a matter of weeks before we moved from work from home, they didn't quite develop, where they sit within the structure of NAB, how their team deals with other teams, what they do that contributes to our strategic endeavours. They're not having incidental conversations around the water cooler, etc. And so there's probably a disconnect there as to what it is that they're doing and how they fit within not only their team, but within our organisation as well. And that's something that we try and tap into, via sending out emails and keeping them connected and, having information sessions. But there's probably, again, a lot more that we can do in that space as well.
Yeah, this might also be showing up because managers are stretched. Something we talked to all of those grads and interns around the world in those live sessions was the importance. One of the 5 skills we gave them, again, a crash course on managing up. And the reason why we chose that as one of the 5 skills in terms of how to have an impact during COVID-19 was to help them to understand that there's a good chance the manager's under a lot more pressure than they are right now. And you might not be, as a grad, getting the support and interactions and feedback that you need. So you've got to help your manager give it to you. And that might be playing out in some of this uncertainty about, well, what is my role now? And what am I going to be valuable come Christmas? Are there going to be cuts and all of this type? The last section here is to just look at some of the behaviours, if you like, some of the insights from behavioural science and what we can learn from psychology in this time as well. So here are 3 cognitive biases to consider in early talent programs as you do kind of reimagine, redesign and navigate through the new world. You might have come across this before. If you haven't, it's fascinating. This is the Cognitive Bias Codex. There are hundreds of biases. There are some that have been popularized, like confirmation bias, because of our discussions in the industry around diversity and blind recruitment and these types of areas. But that is but one cognitive bias. There are hundreds of them. And I thought what would be really, really great, we thought what would be really, really great is just to think about 3 of all of those. What are 3 that you might just be worth considering over the next sort of 3 to 9 months as you redesign and reimagine your training and development program for your grads. Now also, these are not necessarily biases to avoid, but sometimes they're biases to harness as well. I mean, we're human beings, we're biased. So it's more about awareness and appropriate use of biases rather than trying to remove them or constantly try to avoid them. But here are 3 that are worth considering as you navigate the period forward. Our bias towards recency is worth keeping in mind as you redesign and roll out development programs in the next little period. Recency is a phenomenon of a person most easily remembering something that has happened recently compared to remembering something that has occurred a while back. This is relevant because as you roll out your next phase of development initiatives and programs, it's really important that that development program takes them through a process that doesn't just deal with what they've just come out of or are just in now. They came into your organization with strengths. They came into your organization with talents. They came into your organization with experiences that happened before COVID. Yes, there was a world before COVID. So just make sure that as you're taking your grads through your development program, that it's not all about recency and the world that has just unfolded. It's natural for human beings to remember and focus on that most. Second one is anchoring. It's the common human tendency to rely on the first piece of information offered when making decisions. So I think this is super important when you think about your pre-boarding. You have an opportunity to positively anchor your 2021 graduates in a way that will help them psychologically and professionally. As human beings, we look for anchors anyway. So if that cohort and your pre-boarding program, if it comes to them proactively and says, these are the skills that are going to help you build over the next 6 months, and this is what we've got arranged for you, and we've got your back, that becomes their anchor. And that's a good thing. So that you can actually harness an anchoring bias to help them in pre-boarding as well. And then the third one we think is really worth considering is salience. For your grads right now, your existing cohorts, there's 1,700 webinars available every day. There's lots of information maybe coming at them. What are the things that you want to make obvious to them and make easiest to recognize in terms of their development? This is kind of like a thinking less is more type approach, but just making sure that the development that you want them to experience and what you want them to get out of it and why is salient to them, so that it gets cut through in the noise. You have a bias towards salience. So there are three: recency, anchoring, and salience. There's some insights there from psychology and behavioral science. There is more available to you. We have invested so heavily in the last 60 days into resources and free initiatives. So if you want to go through to the resources section on developmentbeyondlearning.com, there's a whole array of stuff there. Keep an eye out on your emails as well for new events and things that will keep coming. But if you go to resources on Development Beyond Learning, you'll find lots of things, including the Future is Human series, which we're up to episode 2 now of, and we'll continue on. There's podcasts of other organizations that we've been involved in. There's articles, there's videos, etc. So please go to the resources section on Development Beyond Learning, and remember to stay connected as well. Thanks very much for coming. Well done for making the time.